Hi, my name is Lillian, and today I'm presenting to you my digital unit plan. So the name of my unit is Living in Medieval Europe, and it is for 7th graders who are learning about Europe during the Middle Ages. So I'm going to just give you a brief run-through of my site. So the website is called livinginmedievaleurope.weebly.com, and in this unit we are going to cover specifically the standard. Students will analyze the political, geographic, economic, religious, and social structures of the civilizations of medieval Europe. So in this unit we're going to talk about the geography of Europe, the spread of Christianity during the Middle Ages, and the emergence of new social and political institutions such as feudalism and just the Catholic Church in general. We're also going to talk about the bubonic plague and the Crusades. So the big ideas of the unit are the fall of the Western Roman Empire and its effect throughout Europe, the rise of Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Catholic Church, the rise of feudalism, the manor system in medieval society, the Crusades, and the lay investiture controversy. So Pope Gregory VII, King Henry IV, and just the conflict between the secular monarchs and the Catholic Church. And then lastly, we end with the Black Death and the end of feudalism and of the early Middle Ages. All right, so in the home page, you just get an idea of the overall unit. And to get started, we'll look at the unit plan map. Okay, so if we take a look at the unit plan map, we'll see that the main topics we're covering are the rise of Germanic kingdoms. So this is a reading lessons in which students will read a chapter from their world history textbook and explore the emerging power of the Christian Church and secular monarchs, and identify the main effects of the fall of the Roman Empire on Western Europe. And then after that, we will be covering feudalism. So in this lesson, students will identify the different social classes in the feudal hierarchy and their different functions. And then they'll analyze the effects of the feudal system on Western Europe society. Afterwards, we'll explore the power of the church. So students will analyze primary sources and secondary sources to identify the different roles the church played in medieval society. So they'll see that the church wasn't just a religious institution, but it also affected politics and intellectual life. Then we will cover the Crusades. So they learned earlier that in the unit that the church was very powerful in politics, and they inspired people to go on the Crusades. So in this lesson, students will analyze the religious, economic, social, and political factors that led to the Crusades and the outcomes of the 3 main Crusades. So this is a discussion lesson in which students will look at the Crusades from multiple perspectives. So not just from the eyes of the Crusaders and the Europeans, but also from the eyes of the Muslims and the Jews who were living in the Holy Land at that time. And then lastly, we'll do a simulation game about the Black Death. And in this lesson, students will do a simulation in order to gain an understanding of what the plague was, how it spread so quickly, and what its effects on medieval Europe were. Okay, so go back to the lessons. So all the lessons are organized in here. We have lecture, reading, inquiry, simulation, and discussion lessons. So I just want to show you some of the features of each one. So for the feudalism lesson, students will be taking notes while the teacher gives a lecture, and the lecture incorporates a lot of visuals, examples, and discussion questions. And it's centered around these two essential questions: why did feudalism develop, and how did feudalism affect the political, social, and economic environment of medieval Europe? So, as you can see, there are just different questions, pictures, and the lecture PowerPoint is meant to be interactive and to get the students really thinking, and also applying their prior knowledge and questioning old theories that they've had about medieval Europe. And then so at the end of the lessons, it's kind of a full circle, and they answer these questions, the essential questions, with their new understanding. Along with the lecture presentation, students will also fill out guided notes. Okay, and then another lesson. In this reading lesson, we kind of teach students how to read their textbook in the most effective manner and to really get the key ideas from their reading. So to help them do that, the activity that I have them do is a reading timeline. So they only get 8 boxes, and then they kind of have to organize the most important events that they believe were in the reading, and then put them in the appropriate order. And this kind of helps them see cause and effect relationships between the different events. Okay. And after that, students will explore the power of the church, and this is an inquiry lesson, so this is where they kind of learn how to work with primary source documents. And 7th graders are still, this is very new to them, so to kind of scaffold their analysis, the teacher would first model how to analyze a primary source document. And then they will give students in groups they'll give students a primary source document set along with a chunking graphic organizer, and have students now practice analyzing primary source documents. So as you can see, here are the document sets, and I kind of mix it up with art and direct quotes and official documents. And you don't want to give them too many because they're pretty new at this. And then they get to use the chunking graphic organizer to help them think more like a historian and kind of break down their ideas and notes. So they have to write notes on the document, summarize the meaning, and then come up with the historical significance of the document. Okay, and then another lesson we have is a simulation, and in this simulation the details are described in great depth, and this is actually adapted from another classroom. But as you can see, here are the directions, and it comes with handouts as well. But basically, students will be traveling, pretend traveling to different towns, and in each town they will roll a dice and see how many nights they stay at that town. And then depending on how many nights they stay, they have to draw from a paper bag and see if they have contracted the disease or not. And then from this activity, students will see how quickly the disease spread and how dangerous the Black Death was. And then afterwards, students will discuss the effects that this might have had on the people of medieval Europe. And they'll do a whole simulation reflection. And then lastly, my final lesson is a discussion lesson about the Crusades, and in this lesson students discuss the complex causes and effects of the Crusades and explore multiple perspectives from this event. So students are first given an anticipation guide. So in an anticipation guide, they read a statement and they have to decide if they agree or disagree, and then they will put their reasonings for why they both agree or disagree. Later, they're going to be asked to question or summarize their arguments through a group discussion. And so the anticipation guides are a really good way to start discussion, get people thinking about these issues and how they feel about them. And then specifically for the Crusades, students will determine, were the Crusades truly successful? Did they do more good than bad? Were there justified reasons for fighting in the Crusades? Was the church justified in being involved in this non-religious affair, although it was religious in some aspects? Okay, and then students will do a jigsaw in which they become experts on one of the questions or statements and then present to the rest of the class about it. Okay, and then now to cover the culminating project. So the project kind of brings all the topics together, the social, political, economic, and religious aspects of medieval Europe. And it's an individual project, and in the project, students will demonstrate what life was like in medieval Europe by producing a short story from the perspective of a character living in Europe during the Middle Ages. So this story is a piece of historical fiction, and it allows the students to use their imagination and their knowledge of medieval Europe to invent their character and then tell a first-person story about that character. So they can choose different events from the time period to focus their story on. They could focus on the Black Death, the Crusades. In my sample short story, I told the story from the perspective of a noble named Frederick, and he's living during the time of feudalism where it was at its strongest, and the story is just about how he how life was during the feudal ages, especially when the Vikings would try to invade and cause a lot of chaos in the towns and the villages. So I provide this sample for students to refer to, and then I also provide very specific directions for the project with all the different requirements, and then I also provide the grading rubric. So this project is scored on their content, the historical analysis they do. They have to use different secondary sources and primary sources. They're also graded on language and creativity, so making it kind of a fun story and not just a history report, and then also grammar, spelling, punctuation, and formatting. Okay, well, that is my unit plan. There are also many resources for students and teachers, such as student engagement strategies and a primary source toolbox, and an explanation on why we should study medieval Europe. All right, thank you very much. Please feel free to explore the site.